Good afternoon, Stanford. This week we are talking about the size of your scene, or maybe a better way to phrase it might be, how do we as writers find the right quantity of information to include in a certain scene? The word right in this context meaning that we're not stuffing it with so much information that a reader gets confused and isn't able to take away any facts at all. And then on the flip side of that would be it's not doing so little, or it's not contributing such a sparse amount of information that when we come back in the revision process, we ask ourselves, how is this scene even helping the overall effect of the story? So I categorize all these things as value assignments. How are we telling, or how are we signaling to a reader how important a moment is? We can pick a nice round number just to make the sake of this discussion easier. So let's say that a particular scene that you're writing is going to be 10 pages long. If you spend 6 of those 10 pages talking about a certain memory from a character named Clarissa's history, 6 of 10 pages would be 60% of that scene. You are signaling to your reader that that memory is of utmost importance. It's incredibly pivotal, not only to the characterization, but it's probably also going to influence some of the plotting or the narrative conflict as the piece continues to move forward. Whereas, let's say in the same 10-page sequence, you have a 2-sentence paragraph detailing a more minor memory from Clarissa's personal history. You are assigning a very low value to that. So you'd see how if the 6 of the 10 pages get set aside for one memory, that memory gets a really high value assignment. On the flip side, 2 sentences out of 10 pages is getting a very low value assignment. So we can kind of think about it from that standpoint mathematically as just saying, if I give a huge chunk of page time to a certain memory, it's important. Or if I give a huge chunk of time to something in the present action, you're telling your reader that that's very, very important. Whereas if it's something you're just hitting peripherally or something that you mentioned in passing, you're assigning a very low value to that. The driving image that I used in this week's reading was that of a water balloon. So say the balloon itself represents the scene. You know that you want to have a water balloon fight. You have your balloon. The first thing that you need to do is go to the tap and fill it up with water. So let's say that the first time you do this, you don't put enough water in the balloon. It's just kind of this little bud, and when you tie it off and you throw it at the person that you're having the water balloon fight with, it just very innocuously bounces off of them. So the second time you go back, to the spigot, you fill it up, you're going to get it as full as you possibly can, you're really going to fill it up, and man, it ends up exploding on the spigot and splashing all over you. So one has not been full enough, one has been too full. Being a smart person, you're learning from your mistakes. You take the third balloon, you go back to the spigot, you hedge your bets. You fill it somewhere in between the one that doesn't have enough water in it and the one that has too much water in it. And you find the right amount, you tie it off, you engage in your water balloon flight, and it goes off without a hitch. In a sense, that's what we're trying to do when we put a scene together. Rarely on a rough draft are we just going to nail a scene. That we sit down, we type it all out, and lo and behold, we get this gift from the muse where the scene contains the perfect amount of information. Certainly that happens on occasion, but that can't be anything that we rely upon. What we're going to rely upon is we use our rough draft to get a vague sketch of the scene written. Then once we have that vague sketch composed, then we're going to come back more analytically, more practically, and say to ourselves, okay, it's a 10-page scene. As it stands right now, there's a 6-page memory for this girl, Clarisse. That's a very high value assignment. Now it's your turn as the author to take a step backward and say to yourselves, Do I want to give that high of a value assignment to this memory? Is it germane enough to the present action? Is it important enough to who Clarice is as a character that it deserves 60% of that particular scene's body? Or do you say to yourself, you know what, I understand why I sketched this out in draft one. I probably, as the writer, needed to know this piece of information, but it isn't going to be the kind of thing that an end reader needs to see, so you decide to either cut it up into a smaller chunk. Maybe it ends up getting 2 pages, maybe it ends up getting 3 pages, or it just goes into that other category where you say to yourself, this was just research that I, as the writer, had to do in order to know which moments that I'm going to zero in on in the future. So one of the things that we're talking about with value assignments and with this idea of the water balloon is to ask yourselves as an author, what are your goals with the scene? How are each component that you have on the stage helping to the overall effect? Are you giving these things too high of a value assignment? Or on the flip side, if it was just a couple lines in draft one, maybe you come back to it in draft two and you say to yourselves, you know what? I thought this was just going to be a passing detail about Clarice, but as I'm getting to know her more, I realize this is going to be really important to who she is. So now I'm going to go back in and I'm going to do some kind of expansive rewrite, and I'm going to really, really blow that up. It's my goal as we talk about this week that you really start to see the fluidity of your scenes. And this is why the image of the balloon works so well. It expands, it contracts, it expands, it contracts. And it gets us in a really healthy mindset about not getting too wedded to what we do in draft one. Draft one is just going to be the template. Draft one is just going to be the lump of clay. And once we have those raw materials generated, then we're going to dig in and draft, 2 through whatever until the book is finished, and we're going to really go in and make the work sizzle from there. That's when we'll really start to set our value assignments, but it's never too early to begin thinking about these things as you rough draft. So as you're putting your assignment together for this week, be conscious of these things. Be saying to yourself, am I asking my reader to retain too much information? Meaning, symbolically, is the water balloon going to explode on me all over the spigot? And then the flip side of that would be, if you read through your excerpt for this week and you say to yourself, I've only introduced one new piece of information here. This scene's not doing enough. Once you have that realization, then you can go in and make sure to get some more tidbits or dollop some more facts along the way to make sure that scene is going to find the sweet spot in which it's neither asking us to do too much work, nor is it accomplishing too little to earn its place in the revision process. Okay, so be thinking of your value assignments as you draft ahead this week. Have happy writing.